Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome back to the Ultimate Doctor Who Marathon. This is the show where they look at every classic Doctor Who story plus a bunch of Big Finish audio dramas, one episode a day, 7 days a week. And today, on the 2nd of September 2019, we're starting to look at the 5th story in the 5th series of 4th Doctor Adventures, Gallery of Ghouls, starting with Part 1. Gallery of Ghouls starts off with this great atmosphere, some great banter, honestly, between the Doctor and Romana. K9's absent again. He's relegated to the TARDIS. The Doctor's trying to find the Brighton Pavilion opening, which is kind of important because we know that's where, if you know the TV series, you know that's where season 18 starts. So it's interesting that Big Finish is putting in some hints as to that they're heading towards season 18 material already, even though they aren't. But they get it off by years, and this is the main joke where Romana thinks they only get it off by minutes, because they're talking like 1830 versus 1855 or something like that, and it's really funny. Lalla Ward and Tom Baker are great together. They're having a lot. They're obviously having a lot of fun with this series, and it's really rekindled quite a lot of their there's strengths together, and their stories, and they're really good. They're really solid chemistry and a real good sense of who they are as characters. They really know each other, and they're cracking jokes and having a lot of fun. But Gallery of Ghouls starts off excellently. It's very much inspired by. I immediately think of House of Wax, the Vincent Price film, just because of the setting and sort of the tone. You have Madame Tussaud being played by Celia Imrie, who is a joy. She has a waxworks, and her main competitor is Ghoul, spelled Goole, and his Gallery of Ghouls, spelled Ghoul's. And she immediately thinks the Doctor and Romana are spies, and they steal Marie Antoinette's death mask head type thing. That's which is okay. This entire sequence is excellent. It's hilarious. There's so much charm here from Tom Baker, Lalla Ward, and Celia Imrie, as they really play off each other very nicely, and they make this story sparkle. There's a real shine here. There's something that it's really shining through as a story, as it kind of devolves into a comedy runaround. But the comedy runaround is enjoyable as it is. Things are done for comedic purposes, obviously. But Tom Baker, of course, takes it incredibly seriously, and the story only improves from there, as the characters really do get to have a lot of fun playing off each other and doing just showing about how much they can do with the material they're given. Alan Barnes wrote this script, and he has a great eye for comedy. He wrote White Ghost for series 3, and he's done some more stuff here and there, including some stuff that he's done a lot of stuff for Big Finish that we will be covering well into the future. He's a name who's been around since the beginning of Big Finish, and he's contributed a lot. Gallery of there's also there's some sinister aspects, like the idea is that the Waxworks are alive in sort of an Auton-like thing. It isn't the Nestines, and it isn't the Autons. There is no build up to surprise. It's the Nestine consciousness. No, it's a completely new villain, but it's a villain made out of waxworks, which is genuinely great for some horrific imagery. There's like, you have a character melting to get away, like a villainous character melting to get away, which is just sort of squelchy, and the sound design in this story is great. It really does. It really does a lot to. It really does a lot to get things. To get things kind of moving, and to get the story basically to a point where it can be really good. It actually, it's what's quite interesting is that this is a pretty small cast. There's like only 6 cast members. You have, I say, Tom Baker and Lala Ward, Celia Imrie. You have Nicholas Grace playing Ghoul with this sort of slimy charm. He's not charming per se, but he's slimy, that he's just so interesting that you're like, he is most definitely a character, as people would say. He's not the standard. He's not your standard. He's not your standard villain, but he's not a hero either. He's a he's a fun character, and it really is enjoyable. It's a very enjoyable story that you get a real sense that things that this is a story that it's fun. The biggest problem here is that it kind of just devolves into a comedy runaround with the episode. It builds up to a great cliffhanger, of a great in peril cliffhanger, but you have just the issue of, it's just, you get the real issue that, there's the comedic element here, that kind of is that kind of goes over. That's something that that really you get. You get the story built up into into a plot that just sort of that just sort of falls into a nice little story. So overall, I am going to give Gallery of Ghouls Part 1 an 8 out of 10. Alright, it is the 3rd of September 2019, and I just finished listening to Part 2 of Gallery of Ghouls. The kind of thrilling conclusion. I really don't quite know how to describe it. It's not the most thrilling I've heard. Not a bad episode by any means, still pretty fun. You get this, the Madame Tussaud basically gets outed as the fraud she is, but like, she's not a bad person, she's not the villain of the piece. That is still most definitely Ghoul, who is, who basically spends much of the episode he's trying to take over the world with his waxworks, basically because he's sort of a parasite with tendrils. Like, Alan Barnes does an excellent job of really giving of really giving Ghoul this very, very dark description, and a very, very a description that's just, it's very much a description of a character who's like, totally one of those really, really, one of those, is a character who you really see just as a very much as a, as a real, dark villain, and one of those villains that you can really get behind, just as a character. You really sort of feel where the character's coming from, sort of where the darker elements of the character lie, and where they really emerge from. There's a lot of like talking waxworks and things in this episode. It's an episode that it doesn't try to take itself too seriously, and once again, it tries to be like, oh, we're building up to the beginning of season 18. You really have, you have this amazing waxwork of Marie Antoinette, which just sort of comes alive and becomes a character. You have a policeman that's called, and then he becomes, Ghoul becomes the policeman, and to try to trick them, and then become eventually the waxworks burn down in a fire. Basically because this story was definitely inspired by House of Wax. So you get that House of Wax. Here's how everybody ends up. Here's how that movie concludes with the waxworks going up in flame and being being a very, very, being a big sort of, a big flaming type piece, portion of the story. But then he impersonates Romana, which is genuinely really, really good. In a really good impersonation, and the kind of an obvious way of getting out of it, of how the Doctor sort of realizes where everything, how the story can end. It's obviously the Doctor isn't going to be a character looking for the real is looking for the real Romana, and isn't going to let this faker into his TARDIS easily. Obviously is going to call the character out on it, and really it's a good example of how the Fourth Doctor's sort of intelligence shows. The Doctor here is massively intelligent, and you really get a real sense of what that intelligence really kind of means for the Doctor here, and really what really what the story kind of is overall, just as a story. There is a big sense of what's going on. though it's one of the biggest issues here is that a lot of this part 2 is predictable. It doesn't try to do anything more than would be expected of a House of Wax. What would really be expected of a House of Wax homage. It's okay. It's an enjoyable story, but it's not one of the one of perhaps the absolute best stories. It's not perfect. It's pretty good. So overall, I'm going to give Gallery Ghouls Part 2 a 7 out of 10. That being said, we add up the scores and average them out to give Gallery of Ghouls a final score of 7.5 out of 10. Thank you everybody for watching this installment of the Ultimate Doctor Who Marathon. As always, please leave a like, comment, and subscribe if you haven't already. I'd like to get a conversation going in the comments. And join me next time when we take a look at the last story of Season 5 of the Fourth Doctor Adventures before we get to the two release finale with The Trouble with DRAX.